History remembers the handshake, but forgets the knife buried deep in the back. The alliance between Britain and America wasn't born from brotherhood, but from cold calculation and predatory opportunity. While London crumbled under Nazi bombs, Wall Street bankers saw the chance of a century. They realized that a desperate empire will sign anything to survive just one more day. Winston Churchill is remembered as a hero who rallied the free world against tyranny. But behind closed doors, he was a beggar negotiating the total liquidation of his own country. The British treasury was empty by late 1940, and the empire was bleeding out. They had spent every ounce of gold fighting a war they could not afford alone. Enter Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the man who presented himself as a savior of democracy. In reality, he was a ruthless pragmatist determined to make America the new global master. The narrative sold to the public was the Lend-Lease Act, a simple loan of equipment. It was marketed like lending a garden hose to a neighbor whose house is burning. But you do not lend a hose to a neighbor without expecting something massive in return. The United States demanded payment in blood, territory, and the very soul of the empire. Before a single crate of ammunition was shipped across the Atlantic, the demands arrived. America wanted the British gold reserves shipped to Fort Knox as a down payment for survival. Imagine the humiliation of stripping your national vaults while your cities are burning. A British warship secretly transported billions in gold to America, leaving the pound sterling utterly defenseless. This was the greatest transfer of wealth in history, happening in total silence. The United States absorbed the life savings of the British Empire before the ink was even dry. But gold was just the appetizer for the American appetite for global dominance. They wanted strategic real estate that the British had spent centuries acquiring and defending with their navy. The destroyers for bases deal was the most lopsided trade ever witnessed in geopolitics. 50 obsolete World War I ships were traded for 99-year leases on critical British military bases. From Newfoundland to the Caribbean, the Union Jack came down and the Stars and Stripes went up. America did not just join the war, they purchased the world's infrastructure at a discount. The British public cheered the arrival of these ships, unaware of the actual cost. They were celebrating the sale of their global footprint to a rising power that wanted them gone. Then came the intellectual theft known as the Tizard Mission. Britain handed over its most advanced technological secrets, including radar and the jet engine, hoping for manufacturing support. American corporations took these blueprints and patented them as their own inventions. The technological superiority of the United States military today is built on stolen British genius given away in desperation. While British factories were being bombed into rubble, American industry boomed like never before. The war that destroyed Europe was the greatest economic stimulus package in the history of America. By 1945, the British Empire was morally victorious, but financially destitute. They owed billions to Washington, a debt that would shackle their economy for decades to come. The United States emerged as the only creditor in a world full of debtors. This is the moment the dollar replaced the pound as the reserve currency of the world. They call it the special relationship, but it is the relationship between a master and a servant. Britain became a junior partner, forever reliant on American approval to act internationally. Look at the Bretton Woods Conference, where the new financial order was established. The British delegation was outmaneuvered and forced to accept a system rigged entirely for American benefit. John Maynard Keynes tried to save the pound, but he was powerless against American leverage. The threat was simple: sign the deal or starve in the post-war ruins. This was the calculated end of an empire, executed not by enemies, but by friends. The Nazis destroyed the buildings, but the Americans dismantled the economic foundations of British power. Lend-Lease was never about fighting fascism. It was about ensuring the British Empire could never rise again. It was a hostile takeover disguised as a humanitarian rescue mission. When the war ended, the aid was cut off immediately and without warning. The British economy went into shock, forcing them to accept a loan with even harsher conditions attached. They were forced to dismantle their system of imperial preference, opening their markets to American goods. The empire was forced to consume the products of the nation that bankrupted it. It took the United Kingdom until 2006 to pay off the war debt. Generations of British taxpayers worked to pay back the cost of their own liberation. This historical heist set the precedent for how modern superpowers operate today. Aid is never free. It is a weapon used to extract sovereignty from nations in crisis. Look at the international loans given to developing nations in the modern era. The mechanism is identical. Provide money in exchange for control over resources and strategic infrastructure. We see this pattern repeating as new empires rise to challenge the old ones. The cycle of debt and dominance is the engine that drives the history of civilization. The United States learned well that you do not need to conquer land to control it. You simply need to own the debt and control the flow of capital. But now the wheel of history is turning once again in our time. The American empire, built on that post-war plunder, is facing its own crisis of debt and overextension. The mountains of gold in Fort Knox are no longer enough to back the system. The dollar is being challenged just as the pound was challenged 80 years ago. New powers are rising in the East, using the same economic warfare against the West. They are lending money, building ports, and seizing assets across Africa and Asia. The trap that caught Churchill is now waiting for the leaders of the West. Desperation leads to bad deals, and bad deals lead to the loss of national sovereignty. We are watching the slow-motion collapse of the order established in 1945. The creditors are becoming the debtors, and the predators are becoming the prey. History is a brutal teacher that punishes those who forget its lessons. The British thought their empire was eternal until the moment they had to sell it to survive. Most people sleepwalk through these transitions, believing the world is static and safe. They do not see the invisible war being fought in boardrooms and central banks. The illusion of stability is maintained to keep the population productive and docile, but underneath the surface, the tectonic plates of global power are shifting violently. Understanding Lend-Lease reveals the true nature of geopolitical alliances. There are no friends in the game of empires, only temporary interests and permanent rivals. If you think your country is immune to this kind of liquidation, look closer. Look at who owns your national debt and who controls your critical infrastructure right now. The vampire requires blood to survive, and empires require the wealth of others to sustain themselves. When the host dies, the parasite must find a new victim. We are entering a period of global foreclosure where nations will be stripped for parts. The mechanisms developed during World War II have been perfected for the digital age. Currency devaluation is the modern version of shipping gold bars across the ocean. Inflation is the invisible tax that transfers wealth from the people to the state. The story of the British Empire is a warning to the American Empire. Supremacy is rented, never owned, and the rent is due every single day. Those who control the narrative control the past and the future. They want you to believe in the myth of benevolence, not the reality of predation. But now you see the truth behind the handshake and the smiles. You see the mechanics of how a superpower is dismantled piece by piece without a fight. The cycle is closing in, and the next transfer of wealth will be digital. It will happen faster than the gold shipments, and it will leave you with nothing. Prepare yourself for the shift, because the new landlords are coming. They will not ask for your permission, just as they did not ask the British people. The empire is dead. Long live the empire, until the debt comes due. This is the dark history of the world, and you are living in the final chapter.